Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Doc and Queenie Guest Live. Hey there, Queenie.
Hey there, Doc. I love Guest Live. What about you?
I do too. I stopped everything so we could have this very special guest on today. Welcome, Nancy Hanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you. This is great. Doc acts like she's been maybe working in the greenhouse. I'm not sure.
We won't even talk about that right now.
We're so excited to have you, Nancy. This is great.
Yes. So Nancy, let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live in Western Washington. I actually live in the same county as Seattle, but we don't claim them. Live up at the base of Mount Rainier. I spent a long career, over 40 years, in the medical world. In imaging, I did mostly regular imaging, surgical imaging, CAT scan, that type of thing, mammography. And what I learned in that 4 decades plus is that I would like to avoid getting there if I could possibly do so. And so I started looking about 30 years ago into not alternative, but integrative. We had a child who was chronically ill, and his life will forever require one medication. And but he wasn't doing well. And so we looked into all kinds of different things and sifted and sorted and read a lot of books. And as a result, I have learned to support my health and wellness and that of my family as much as possible with wellness products. And we know that in medicine, there's a lot of things that raise our eyebrows. The same is true in the world of integrative or alternative. It isn't there just because the label says it's there. The Food and Drug Administration doesn't regulate those things that we would really probably prefer that are regulated. And so it's up to our own sorting and sifting and research. And I got into the field of glycobiology, and that was very helpful to me. My mother was given a drug before I was born that causes all kinds of degenerative changes in much of the body and in places that didn't plan. And I got ovarian cancer about 8 years ago, and I just did not feel up to a medical, I had surgery, but I didn't feel up to chemo and radiation. And I sifted and sorted and worked. And I chose to go the natural route. I would not tell anybody else to do it. I would share what I did. But 8 years later, I have done very, very well. I'm not arrogant. I have the testing. But in the process, I learned that one of the most important things in the natural realm is to know the source, and also quality assurance and quality analysis and quality control. Those are not given. If you buy it off the shelf in the big box store, you don't know where it came from. I could package up the weeds in my backyard and call them Nancy's sleep formula because it makes me tired to think of going out there and pulling all those things. It would be totally legal to sell it as Nancy's sleep formula. And so I actually work with several different companies, and my preference is that they actually will show you the paperwork of their analysis and their quality control, both in-house and third party, when they go for third party validation. And I've really enjoyed working of late in the hemp field. And I have all kinds of things that make things hurt and ache. And I have a chronic illness as a result of a little thing that bit me about, many years ago, and lots of inflammation. And I can take drugs, but look at the list of side effects. Sometimes it can be 3 pages long. It's not perfect. What I do isn't perfect, but I have quality that I really didn't expect at one time.
I think it's.
Oh, I'm sorry, Doc. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Queenie.
I wanted to know where we as a consumer, where can we go for research? Like when you said be sure and research and check it out and read the label, how would we know what we're looking for or like hoping not to see? How do you do that?
There's various ways. A lot of the supplements will have a seal of approval on it. And again, you need to check that seal of approval. Years ago, I found one that seal of approval. It gave a different name that was checked by a different company. When I looked up that company, it had the absolute same address and box number of the company that was selling the supplement. So they did what they called third party, was actually their own in their own offices. But you should be able to find a seal of approval in the hemp world. That's the US Hemp Authority. And then there's still outside testing. And that outside testing is often very spendy. And so if you find a cheap supplement, you're probably getting a cheap. It may not have
Lots of filler. Yeah.
lots of filler. Yeah.
I think it's fantastic, like what you are saying with, do your own research. It's basically be your own doctor.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yep.
Of course that floats my boat. Everything you're saying floats my boat. Well, both of us, Queenie, because Queenie is very knowledgeable with the water piece and what's going into our bodies. But so as far as the hemp, is what kind of product do you share with others, or what tell us a little bit about that business?
Yeah, with the hemp, it's all water soluble. And what we have is an absorption study with that company, and it was done by a very large clinic in the Midwest that does independent testing. They do not endorse your product. They endorse the way they do it, which is a very, very good way. And they tested it 12 hours for absorption. It absorbed within an hour, completely absorbed within an hour, as much as it would, which was up to 94%. And it was still at that percent 12 hours later, and no one expected it to last that long. So the testing had to stop. Plan was, to wind things down at 12 hours. And with an oil-based, it will absorb at roughly 6%. And the other part of that, the other piece of that puzzle is you'll buy a bottle of something hemp related and it'll say 1,000 milligrams. It's referring to the entire bottle. And you have to break that down into what is in the dropper when you squeeze the dropper and take the amount.
My head just exploded.
Yes.
My head just exploded. I'm always so excited when I see 1,000 milligrams because I think, oh, one little drop's going to be just zapping me up for the day. And my head just exploded. I did not realize that was for the whole bottle.
Yes. And so that you have to watch that. And then if it's oil-based and you're only getting 6%, you just don't have anything that's very cost effective there. And so you get a water-based one, and you are getting the absorption of approximately 86 to 94%.
Wow.
And then the company that I work with has gone further, and they have many of their products in powdered form, and it makes it easy to transport and less fickle in temperature change. And less likely to break in my purse when I drop my purse on the floor of the car.
Just what you need is just a bunch of
I can relate to that one myself.
So what does that smell?
If it's powder form, what do you mix it with?
You can mix it with water. I mix it with saliva under my tongue. And you know how some of the things that we have to take medically that we really wish we didn't, you get into the emergency room and you're in crisis, they say, stick this under your tongue, because that's where there's a great deal of absorption. And that's very, very true of that. But along that line with the testing is the sourcing. And these companies most of them should tell you where they source their products. Hemp is a hyperaccumulator, as is aloe. And those are two things that are in many of the things that we like to take for the things that befall us health-wise. Just a side note that aloe was one of the things that was, aloe and some of similar things like that were planted around Chernobyl just to try to absorb some of that awfulness. And so it will do that. It will also absorb the good. But some of the places where we are getting it from in this country are grown, some of that aloe, some of that hemp is grown in a country that we don't have a lot of, not real happy with.
Yeah.
And we don't have any control. And then we get it without testing. But in that country, they allow human fertilizer. And that really concerns me. And the water is very polluted. Some of the areas that look like when they show you this is our soil that has human fertilizer, it's also near large cities and their airports and all the pollution associated. So with the hemp product specifically, you can flash the QR code and it'll give you a 1 to about 10-page synopsis of what is in or what is not in that product. Aluminum, cadmium, mercury, pollutants, sprays. Many of these things are sprayed, and the way to grow it and organically source it is to get it away from those things. We can't choose what the wind does, but we can choose to test it, and many things do get rejected. And every once in a while in transportation, that's where the in-house testing after the third-party testing is important. Is there will be some problem with transportation with the refrigeration, too much or too little. Too much is a problem for hemp, or too little, and then when it gets back in house, suddenly there's a problem with it. And so that in-house testing before it's put on the market is really important. And yes, it does raise the price. It also raises my assurance.
Well, and even just your generalities here, there's a lot of detail that the general public doesn't think about or know. Like you're saying, temperature can make a difference. How if it's a liquid or a powder, your source. I mean, it's good to hear you bring up these points, these details. And also, like you started off with, we have to do our own research. We have to, it's going into our bodies. So why wouldn't you? I mean, that's kind of my take.
That's always a big one for me too. Because just like you said with that third-party testing and you see the seal of approval, so you're going, yay. And then all of a sudden you check out the seal of approval and it's the same company, the different name. And that kind of stuff, people assume that everything's fine because it's on a label or it's in a store, or you trust the store or you trust the label. And all of a sudden you go dig and dig and dig a little further and it ain't how it should be. Nancy, I have a question. Actually, one of our biggest questions that we get with my water company is, how long does it take the water to work? And my answer to that is, how long does it take broccoli to work?
Very good. Yes.
And because every body is different, how long do you feel a human being should take a product before they expect results? Because do you give 30 days? Do you give up at 90 days? Do you give up at 10 years? How long should that window be?
And we all know stories of people that say within an hour, oh my goodness, and people that say this isn't doing me a bit of good. And that's why I really believe strongly in trusting your own body and listening to yourself, and don't let family, friends, and physician drown out or your intuition, because we have it. And sometimes in our home, it seems to be my intuition for the sake of my family members. But so I've had people tell me, especially with hemp, they can feel something within an hour. For myself, I was aware that there would seem to be a benefit, but it was at least 2 weeks before I felt for sure that I could say, this is what I need. And then I tweaked the amounts and truly experimented on myself. It makes it a little more difficult with parents when they're working with children. In not just that, but in all supplements. But you have to trust yourself. Your kid. You keep going to the doctor, but the doctor's there from 9 to 5. You're with that child 24/7, and you do know your kid, and you can trust yourself.
I have a basic question, for the people that are not sure. Can you tell us the difference between, CBD, THC, hemp? All of these words have been popping up the past 5 to 10 years. They're becoming more popular. Can you, in a basic way, tell us what the differences are, for somebody that is confused or might not really understand what hemp is?
The hemp plant is the male plant. The marijuana plant is the female plant. If you grow them separately, you'll have very little THC in the hemp plant. It is there, but far, far, far below levels that would cause problems in someone's employment. The CBD is the majority cannabinoid in the hemp plant. It would be, I'm just going to take a guess at around 2/3 of the plant, but the plant has up to 200 cannabinoids, and there are several that are set aside, many of which I can't pronounce even looking at the label. There's
Too many letters.
Oh, too many letters. CBG is from the flower, and that is highly anti-inflammatory. We've seen numbers such as 60 times more than CBD itself. There's CBC that's highly anti-inflammatory. It's very, very calming. And there's one, CBG is cannabigerol. No, I'm not going to try CBC. There's one called CBN, and the only way I remember that is the N, it helps me at night. It's the one that's more beneficial to me for sleep. Now, people have sleep problems for different reasons, and so therefore you experiment on yourself with these things, and also with the hemp products. When you get to enough, you're at enough. You don't take more. You have receptors, and that's a whole conversation in itself. But there's no point in overloading your receptors. It actually will not do you any good and might make you a little tired and achy and make you feel like you've gone backwards. I've done it, and it does make you feel tired and that you've gone backwards.
I
Okay,
love that
so
you have your own experience, and that's what you can bank off of, because you can say, hello, I took too much and I know how to back it off now. And we can basically listen to our own bodies. I love that.
right. Well, we are almost at the end of our guest live spot here, but how can people reach out to you to get more information, or to, go to website to read up more about your company?
Yes, probably the best way to get a hold of me is my email is nancy_hanks@hotmail.com. And on Facebook, I'm Nancy Patton Hanks, because there's a lot of them. And if you email me, I prefer to have the subject line assure me that it's not that I haven't won the Nigerian lotto.
Oh, in this case, maybe they could put in Doc and Queenie, and then you'd know that it was.
That would be perfect.
Many of our friends have not won the Nigerian lotto yet, so that probably would work.
Entry into it. I keep missing it by 6 numbers. I don't know.
Plus, Doc, I think you have to play to win. I'm just guessing.
That's probably true, but they've assured me that I've won.
What is actually, Nancy, that no one has ever asked you yet that you want people to know?
Oh dear, that one's a hard one.
Your knowledge is so vast and your subject matter is ginormous. And to be able to dumb it down to my level would be a gift in itself. And you've done such an incredible job today. And that has helped me understand what you do and how you can help so many people. This is great.
I think probably the question I haven't been asked are what are some of the main building blocks of health and wellness that are just essential that we don't get? Even the World Health Organization and some of the medical societies have told us that we don't get those, but I've never actually had anybody ask. And so in the field of glycobiology, I've never been asked about glycobiology, even though I've delved into it quite deeply and taken a lot of continuing education. It's taught to every doctor. They're just not taught where to go to find it.
No, they're still practicing. Gotta say that.
Yes. And so much of it is subject to their continuing education, and most of that comes from the pharmaceutical realm.
Right.
And,
Well, and they're necessary for certain areas,
they are. And I've often said that when my husband had a heart attack, it was time for CPR, not vitamin C.
Right, exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we have to say goodbye, but thank you for joining us today. We so appreciate you taking the time. This has been fantastic, and everybody reach out to Nancy. This subject is just fantastic with what she knows, and her product is awesome. It gives you a healthy, safer option than just pulling something off a big box shelf and going, okay, well, I think it's going to work. Queenie, any last words before we say goodbye?
Isn't it a funny thing when we mention big box stores, which I do shop in, by the way, but we just automatically assume they never sell anything that was bad for us. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so, of course, I always think in terms of all the bottled water and all that stuff. They never sell anything that was bad for us. And I instantly think of being able to research. Nancy, that has been a beautiful message today, as far as don't just trust the label. You've got to dig deeper. This is great.
Thank you. Yes, totally agree, and agree with what you're doing too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Doc and Queenie Guest Live. You can check Doc and Queenie out at Facebook Live on Mondays at. So until then, everybody have a blessed and fantastic weekend. Thank you again, Nancy, for joining us, and we will catch everyone later.
Bye now.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.